I'm Joe Kane.
I'm Dan Kane.
I'm Sal Conca.
And I'm Wayne Heckler.
And this is the Imperfect Podcast.
Don't forget to check us out at hecklerkane.com and download our episodes for free on iTunes and SoundCloud.
To the bumper.
Today we're here with Geoffrey Cantor, who plays Ellison on Daredevil.
I'm like super excited. He's going to be one of those guests that he's very intelligent and he's a very good, respected actor.
Yeah, he's well respected. I mean, he's got the chops. He's trained all over. In England and the U.S., and he's been on so many different shows and movies. He's worked with the Coen brothers. He's been on The Blacklist, which is one of my favorite shows. He's been on
Law and Order. Sure.
Sopranos.
Yeah, he's been on The Sopranos where he got run over by a car. He's the actor that you probably didn't recognize if you were walking down the street, but you've seen him in so many shows and go, I know that guy from somewhere.
He was on Third Watch. I was on Third Watch.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
We're going to make the
I
game
played
with
it
to see if you were
7
gonna bring that
Degrees
up.
of Kevin Bacon and Joe Kane.
I played a dead body. Had nothing to do with his character, but...
All right, well, let's talk to Geoffrey and see what he's got in store for us and what he has to tell us about Daredevil. Geoffrey, welcome to the Imperfect Podcast. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. You're also in New York, are you not?
I am. We say I'm in New York. To be honest, I'm in New Jersey, which is like New York, except not.
Okay, we'll just pretend you didn't say that. And
Well, I'm in the New York area.
I gotcha.
Right, just a bridge away, that's all.
So close.
Just a bridge away.
So
I spend a lot of time in New York.
Absolutely.
So, where did you grow up? Are you a New Yorker New York native, New York area native?
I was actually born in an Air Force base in California, and we were there for about 4 years. My dad's a doctor, and so, but he joined the Air Force. And then we were in Philadelphia for a year, and Newton Center for a year, and Cherry Hill, New Jersey for 2 years, and then Bergen County from like third grade on. And then, so yeah, I mean, we've been in the New York area since about third grade.
So you grew up with that like army brat sort of mentality of jumping around from place to place.
Yeah, I didn't think I was a brat. It was Air Force. I mean, definitely it impacted me. I remember thinking that I didn't really need to have a house home. That my little unit of family, that was my home, because it felt like, certainly until I was in third grade, we were moving every 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
And so I never felt like I was the kind of person who had that family home to go back to. Mm-hmm. So that's my mentality, I guess. It's impacted me. So and then I lived in England. I lived in England over a 6-year period for about 4 years, 4.5 years. I was in London.
So when did you get into the business? When did you start finding out that you were an actor and that's what you wanted to be?
For me, what happened was I was brought up in a household where there was always music, and my parents liked the arts and theater. My mom's a painter. My dad did community theater. We listened to musical theater and folk music and rock and roll. So we were sort of progressive, liberal Jewish people growing up in a time when we weren't at the cutting edge of that. But the arts it's always part of my life. So I was in choir in grade school and did little shows and wrote a play in third grade. But I thought I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Certainly by the time I got into high school, I thought I was going to be a lawyer because I was a nice Jewish boy from Bergen County. But I was doing a lot of theater. And when I got into college, I did West Side Story. I played action, and Len Berkman, who was head of the drama department over at Smith, wrote me a letter, a handwritten letter about my work, and described it in ways that I had never really considered. And that's sort of when I understood that what I was doing was more than just recreation. It was and so I realized it was sort of like a vocation. I would say it chose me more than I chose it. I didn't want to be an actor. I still don't think it's a great way to live a life logistically, but it is. It's an amazing art form. So I would say it chose me in college. Like it grabbed me by the balls in college.
Nice.
And it hasn't let go So there you go.
Growing up and going to drama school and being an actor and being in the theater,
Hmm.
now working in television or streaming episodic, we'll call it. um, you worked in a lot of TV as well. What
Yeah.
do you have a lot of actors that have inspired you through your career?
Um. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, my favorite actors tend to have come out of I think British theater. You know, I think Anthony Hopkins is for me he's one of my favorite actors. Ian McKellen, um, but also as I've gotten older, I've met some of these actors who I remember seeing. I remember Roger Rees. I saw Nicholas Nickleby. I don't know if you guys remember back. I guess it was 83, maybe even 82. The Royal Shakespeare Company brought Nicholas Nickleby over, and it was the first time that tickets were over $100, and it was an 8.5 hour play, and you could see it all in one piece. And I got to see that. There was a birthday present for my parents, and I remember during there was a very long long break in between the two sort of days, so like an hour for people to get a meal, and but some of the actors were strolling around. I remember seeing Roger Rees. He was just brilliant. And many years later, I saw him at auditions because my English accent is pretty good, and we would audition against each other for British voiceovers. And I remember finally getting the guts to tell him how much he meant to me and what that play meant to me. And he was just, extremely gracious, but also a little taken aback because here we were colleagues. And yet, at the time, I was this kid watching him on stage. I also remember doing that with Len Cariou because I saw him in Sweeney Todd. And so as I've gotten older, I've gotten to work with some of the actors who at one point were there, and now they're like, hey, yeah, we're doing a scene together. You know, working with Glenn Close, working with, Robert De Niro, Judd Hirsch. I've worked with a lot of these people who I had put on, I guess, pedestals when I was younger. And now I actually respect them a bit more because they've looked at me in the eye and said lines with me.
Sure.
You know, we've done scenes together.
So how does the actor being inspired by theater end up in Marvel comic land?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So what happened with that was I had meniscus surgery, and then 2 weeks later slipped because I hadn't rehabbed it, and dislocated my shoulder, and then broke 2 bones. Oh. And with a broken shoulder, I remember having an audition for both Daredevil and The Blacklist, like within like days. And I also was asked by Warren Light to do a play, and so with a broken shoulder, I was doing a play, and I was also doing 2 TV shows. And I think the sort of the overall lesson is that there is no real difference. I know that's not really relevant, actually. That's not really the question you asked, but it was just a time that's how I got. Daredevil happened when I was also doing a play, or I was about to do a play, and so I was doing them simultaneously. And to be honest, for me, there's no real difference in terms of the core of the work, right? The real difference is the end experience. Mm-hmm. So when you get to do a play, whether it's a 20-minute play or a 3-hour play, you're there for that entire period of time, and you get to live a longer event. You have rehearsal time beforehand to figure stuff out. When you do film and television, there's much less left to the imagination for the actor and for the audience. You go onto a set for Daredevil, everything you need is there. Mm-hmm. They'll put a bottle in a box, and if you open that bottle, it won't be real alcohol, but it'll be the right color. And there's something that takes away the burden of having to imagine, so you can really focus on what's going on in the moment-to-moment scene. And that's true of television and film. But what you don't get is you don't have the opportunity to spend the time with your colleagues discovering in the same way you do on stage. but the doorway in, and I talk about this all the time, I guess. The doorway in is exactly the same. You have words that tell you what the character is thinking, what the character is doing, what his relationship with the other characters may be. Mm-hmm. And so that's more or less the same. So for me, the process is pretty similar. It's a bit intuitive. It's a bit analytical. It's a bit, it's thoughtful. And when I have the opportunity to work, certainly in Daredevil season 2, Deborah Ann Wall and I spent a lot of time talking on the phone and even getting together in person to dissect what's going on, because that allows for sort of this greater freedom and relaxation when you're in front of the camera, and you can actually discover in the middle of it. And Daredevil, I have to say, Daredevil has been very unique in that. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I would say that about other shows that I've done, where there's been the amount of time and energy spent by the directors and the writers with the actors, certainly with the supporting level actor, right? I'm certainly not the star of the show. And they spend time with me, and we get to figure stuff out. And
do you think there's a difference between because it's not a network television show and that it's a Netflix commission show, that there's that difference of freedom and budget? And
I do. I think that's exactly right. I don't know if it's budget.
Okay.
I can't talk to budgets.
I guess time is money is what I was thinking.
Because actors were the low end of that totem pole. And no matter what you're doing, no matter how much you're getting paid, less money is spent on actors than anything else. That said, I think what makes Netflix so different, and what makes all the streaming, Netflix sort of set the standard, maybe, right. But I think this may be true of Amazon and Hulu, is that they are not bound by the same time restrictions that network television is bound by, because you're filming everything and then you're editing as you're filming, and you're gonna show it all. You're not showing it next week. Mm-hmm. And so they had this longer window of editing creative process and post creative process that you don't have on other certainly not on networks. Yep. Are you still there?
Good point.
Yeah. We were actually fascinated by you and just listening.
So you froze. No, and you're looking, with Netflix, certainly with Daredevil, it's a 13-hour movie.
Yeah.
And so they allow these relationships to develop. They allow these moments to happen because they're not. I don't think it's a financial thing, but they're not bound by the restrictions of making sure you have the beginning, the middle, and the end of every episode, right? So you look at any Law and Order, each one, there's very few long through lines. Yeah. I mean, you have the same actors, so they started to do that. But I've done 12 Law and Orders, and I can tell you they have a beginning, a middle, and an end, each one.
It's a format that they're cranking out.
Yeah, and I think what's happened is, certainly, again, with Daredevil, is they have taken the long view, and it is long form. It is a 13-hour movie, and that's why you can binge watch it. I mean, I think House of Cards did the same thing. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing the first season of House of Cards, and I thought it was the best thing I'd ever seen. You have stories that go through the entire season. West Wing did it too, right? You have these stories that go through an entire season, but each episode sort of has that episodic formula too. But you also get this through line, and so I think network is starting to pick up on how people are even going to watch their shows. Because I watched the first season of Madam Secretary on Netflix, so I would binge watch 3 or 4 episodes at a time.
Right.
Well,
I think that was the game changer.
And there's some networks that are taking more creative liberties. I mean, you've seen it with shows like Sons of Anarchy or Walking Dead. They push the limits, right? They don't necessarily all stick to the 1 hour mark these days, and they take their liberties. But those are for the really big, they're blockbuster hits, right? Those are the ones that have transcended audiences. I mean,
I don't know about you guys, but I thought that the webisode, the 4-minute thing, was going to be certainly the end of my career, but also what it was going to be. That everyone was banking on the fact that nobody had any attention span, and Netflix proved that wrong. Netflix also proved that reality television is a short-lived fad, and people want character-driven content, story-driven content, and they want to be able to engage. And Marvel is even more unique because Marvel has this audience that's been waiting for this.
Yeah,
Right.
Oh my God, we're finally legitimate.
Right, definitely.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Marvel and how much you knew about Daredevil going into the show, and do you think your knowledge of Daredevil, did that help you land the role?
Like, did you read the comics when you were kids?
I actually was a fan. I was more of a Marvel fan than a DC fan. I'm not sure that looking back I could explain why that was. I thought that what made Daredevil cool was that he was Batman-like, except wasn't quite as rich. He had his own challenges, and I think that's actually one of the things that makes Daredevil, even among the other Marvel shows, so unique, is that you're looking at a guy who has enhanced normal physical ability, and so your suspension of disbelief is, you don't need that much of it,
right?
You don't have to go to a place where somebody's from another planet, so I think that drew me in even back then. I didn't go nuts doing a ton of research, but I did a little bit. I found my character. I wasn't going to play him like other Marvel sort of or even DC like Daily Planet or Daily Bugle kind of editors. It wasn't written that way, and so my knowledge of Daredevil was enough. I didn't go back and watch Spider-Man. I didn't go back and watch Superman because that wasn't the tone that they were setting. I wasn't going to be a James Jonah, Jameson. I wasn't going to be, we got to do this now. That first, it's not how I act, right. But also, it's not how it was written. So knowing about it intrigued me. Knowing the importance of Uric intrigued me. And what they've done for me is, I think, is made me more Uric-like than editor-like. And I appreciate that. I think now you're seeing, it's not all the TV show is being derived from the comic book. You're seeing this give and take, this sort of dialogue between how the comic books are now being written, right? Mm-hmm. Comics are now showing a different sensibility because people can see it on television. But, in a way, comics have always been the, what is it when artists sort of draw the shots?
Panels.
What's that called?
Storyboards. Panels.
Yeah, storyboards. So in a way, comics are already the storyboards of a movie anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what they've always been.
Yeah.
And so I think, my first introduction to the graphic novel was The Watchmen.
Definitely.
And I remember reading those individually and then getting them all combined in one. I think my son has it in his bedroom. And I remember that for me was when I got it. And then I think Daredevil feels to me like it's talking that language.
Cool.
Now, Geoffrey, you're also an acting coach, right? Is that correct? Mm-hmm. So tell me, do you have a philosophy that you teach, a certain method? What is your approach to that?
Well, the approach I have in my teaching is very similar to the approach it is exactly the approach I have in my acting. I'm a product of training, and so what I focus on as an actor, and therefore what I focus on when I'm coaching or teaching or even directing, is really what the text is. I mean, what is the playwright or the writer, the screenwriter, the script writer? What's the story they're telling? And basically, all dialogue is it's a revealing of thought, right? That's your only clue, is what are you thinking, what are you doing? And so that's the philosophy I have, is I don't care what the medium is, really. I mean, that's sort of what I was talking about earlier, is that I don't really differentiate in terms of my approach. And that's what I tell my actors is, some director will tell you stand here, or we need this bigger or smaller. But your job as an actor is to divine the truth of the text and to serve that text, and to dig deep, because a writer, I've heard that, and I've done a little bit of writing, and I know this is true for myself, but writers who have much more experience than I do, they tend to hear these conversations and are observers of life and are sharing that observation, but they don't go deep with each character to divine the motivation for the behavior that they're describing on the page. That's your job as an actor. That's what makes it a collaborative art form. And so your job as an actor is to dive down deep into what that person is doing, what's motivated that person, what justifies the behavior and the thought process. Not to judge them at all, but to justify that behavior. And so that's what I tell my actors. I mean, that's what I spend 99% of my time doing with my actors, is we look at text, we look at a scene or a monologue or whatever they're working on, and we try to figure out, first of all, what are you doing? And then what's the motivation? What's justifying that behavior? And that tends to be my philosophy. That whatever my approach is something you can apply to every medium, because three directors will tell you three different things in the room. So you can't please anybody. Right. That's not your job. Isn't to make people like you or to please you or to figure out what the casting director is going to want or the director is going to want. That's not your job. Your job is to figure out what's going on, because that's ultimately what everybody wants.
In terms of the script work and things like that, one of the things in the Marvel universe, right? Very secretive. How tight?
Very secretive.
Yeah. So how far in advance do you even get a script? I mean, what's your prep like, or is it just they tell you you're going to break your knees if they just if it ends up on a podcast?
So I'm not allowed to talk about any script information that I have ahead of time, obviously, sure. or they will break my knees. But my first season, I was getting sides very late, and I'm the newspaper editor, and I found myself not knowing what I was supposed to know. I didn't even know what was going on in Ellison's world. Like what did Ellison know? What's blown up recently? And they heard that, and I would get calls from the showrunners, and I'd have conversations with them. So they would, and I only need to know what I need to know. I don't need to know what's going on in the prison, or I don't need to know what's going on in a place that Ellison wouldn't know. And in fact, that's useless data for me. I mean, it's curious and interesting, but it doesn't help me as an actor. What helps me as an actor is, what does Ellison know? And if you saw season 1, what Ulrich thought Ellison was doing, what Ellison really was doing, were two very different things. And I needed to know what I actually had done and what I knew. And that was that was an ask. I had to ask for that. That wasn't an automatic gimme. But they heard me, and they were nice about it.
And they were nice enough to provide that type of information for you, which is great.
Yeah, they heard me. I mean, they had their own reasons for not sharing, because they wanted people to react spontaneously. They felt that I said that's an actor trust issue. You have to trust that your actors can do the job you're asking them to do, even if they have a little bit of the information ahead of time, because we need to know where we're going with things.
Right. Now, Geoffrey, tell us about your beard. You think that's helping you get roles? Because I've seen work with you without the beard and with the beard. Yeah. And what's kind of cool is you could play different characters with that.
Thank you. Right now, the beard, I don't know if it helps me get roles or not. It certainly helps define the roles I get. to some extent. You know, if you could walk into a room with this, you're gonna get different roles than than this guy. I mean, but I auditioned for Hail Caesar with the beard, and we ended up, we shaved it because it wasn't right for the time period. And the Coen brothers luckily could see through the mass, the facial merkin that I have. They could see right through it. But it's a good question. I mean, the job defines my facial hair more than the other way around. So because I had hurt myself, I auditioned for Blacklist and Daredevil with the beard because I just wasn't shaving. I didn't have enough body parts to shave. And then once you audition for something with facial hair and then you get called back and put on hold, then I grow a beard quickly. And so within 2 weeks, it looks like I have a beard.
Right.
Within 3 weeks, I kind of have a beard. And so by the time it came to shooting, they were like, keep the beard. So then while you're shooting, you have the beard.
Right.
And then anything you audition for while you're shooting, you have the beard. So it sort of dictates to some extent. Work has dictated my facial hair more than the other way around.
Right, and then that becomes the character.
And a little bit, yeah. And so now I can't shave it until Marvel tells me I can shave it.
I was going to say, are you legally bound to keep the beard at this point?
I'm not legally bound. I mean, if they want to, if my role in Daredevil continues, which we're hopeful that it will, and I guess it's likely because nothing bad happened to me in season 2. I know that they like it, and I will honor that. Legally, I don't know that I'm legally bound to do anything. Do I want the job? Yeah.
Right.
So it's more of a gentleman's agreement right now.
It reminds you of Michael Gross, the family from Family Ties. Remember that? Like once he grew the beard, that he stayed with the beard. Everyone started to know him as that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Well, any signs of possibly Ellison showing up in the Defenders or any of the other Marvel universe on Netflix?
To be honest, I don't know. I mean, if I did know, I wouldn't be at liberty to say.
True.
Anyway, so but I don't really know. I think there have always been hints, even the first season, that Ellison may show up in somebody else's show, and as the only newspaper editor in all of the Marvel universe on Netflix, I guess I'm hopeful, and it's always possible, but I have no data that I can confirm that. I wish I did.
Sure.
So that wasn't a denial.
It wasn't a denial.
But it's definitely a good character. You're right, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, they gave this to me, and they like him. I do know that after season 1, there was some debate as to what Karen was going to do. Like, was she going to go into the law practice, or was she going to work for Ellison? And I'm grateful and happy that they decided that that window, the window of the newspaper into the world of Daredevil, is something that is better for the audience. And, hopefully that can be translated into some of the other shows. I mean, certainly from a career standpoint, it'd be great. Sure. But I think that it's a very good convention, It's a good conceit to have a newspaper access, because especially now, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What an interesting thing it would be to take what we're seeing with our own government and the press translated into the Marvel universe about truth-telling and lies in the press and who's telling the truth, especially when the truth is already a little bit funky in Marvel. That might be an interesting thing for them to address.
Sure.
So if any of them are listening, that's my 2 cents.
Sure, lots of options there.
Well, one last piece I have a question for. If you could play any superhero in the Marvel or DC, I know maybe you're leaning towards Marvel, but in the universe, which which superhero would you be interested in playing?
He'd play Ellison.
There you go. That is true.
Right. I'd be the editor. Superhero. It wouldn't do very well, but that's in my head. The editor. I can see people at Comic-Cons coming in their suits and ties.
And beards.
I don't know. Any superhero. I guess at one point I liked. He has the Flash on. I think at one point I liked the Flash.
Yeah.
But I know I feel a little old to play a superhero now. You know, I don't.
Well, not a Watchman. You could be a Watchman. Watchman.
Right, I'm
all different ages.
Right. I think. What was the guy with the ink blots?
Oh, Rorschach.
Yeah, Rorschach. As an actor, that's who I'd want to play.
Yeah, he's an interesting character.
Yeah, I think so. I think, although I see the owl, I think if somebody were to cast me as a superhero, it'd probably be the little overweight owl with all the contraptions. But I liked Rorschach. I thought he was a very troubled individual.
Cool.
I see actually John Bernthal would play him pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting close to wrapping up. We like to end things with a little bit of advice for folks, and we have a lot of indie filmmakers and actors that listen to the podcast.
Advice for young actors.
Yeah. What do you advise for young folks getting in the biz today?
if there's something else you would rather do, I would advise you to do that. Mm-hmm. The good news is there's more work now than ever before. In the history of this business. It doesn't pay as much, but there is more work. There's more opportunity for more actors than ever before. The work is better than ever before. That said, there's also more people wanting to do this than ever before. More people with less training are doing this than ever before. I still think you have to get trained. I think you need a liberal arts education because you need to have broad spectrum knowledge about a lot of topics. Mm-hmm. And then go to drama school or then get training afterwards. I think you should get trained. I think you need to be able to take the tools that you have intuitively and get the skill to be able to apply to those intuitive artistic sensibilities that you have so that you can have sort of a lasting career, that you have to realize you're a student all the time. Yep. And that you cannot do this to please other people or to become famous. I mean, you might become famous and you might please people, but your job is to do neither. Your job is, you have to be driven to be a discoverer. You have to love that process beyond anything else. And then you'll find that even auditions are fun and that rehearsals are fun and that the art itself is what drives you. And if that's not what interests you, please do something else. Mm-hmm. Please.
Excellent, Geoffrey.
Yeah, thanks so much for that,
that's
Geoffrey.
Really good, yes.
Do you want to tell anybody? I mean, obviously they know they can catch you in Daredevil on Netflix. Is there anywhere else people can connect with you online? You want to?
Yeah, so I have a website at geoffreycantor.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff Cantor, and Instagram is Mr. G Cantor. I'm doing my first Comic-Con. I'm doing the Big Apple Con March 11th and 12th at the Pennsylvania Hotel. That's a Saturday and a Sunday. Oh, cool. I think that's going to be a fun time. We should with some of the other members of Daredevil. I think there's 4 of us. Elgin and John Bernthal and Peter Shinkota are going to be there. Stan Lee is going to be there. So, but it's my first one. Very excited.
Cool. We'll probably stop by and say hello.
Oh, yeah. That'd be great.
Maybe we'll get some press passes and we'll go weasel our ways in there.
and there's I've done a couple of short films that will be coming out. One with a couple of people from the John Oliver show called Anna and the Asteroid. Just a little thing on that. Waiting to hear if the show Civil gets picked up. That would be an interesting, timely show. And hopefully I'll be doing Daredevil season 3 when they start shooting that somewhere down the road. I'm allowed to say that I'm hopeful for that. Sure. And I think that's all that I know of that I can share.
Cool.
Fair enough.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Jeff. This has been a pleasure. Really appreciate your time.
We definitely wish you success in the future and keep up what you're doing.
Much.
It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right.
Take care.